Okay, hey folks, welcome to this edition of Black Beat Podcast. I'm John Washington, the editor-in-chief of Flossin Media, the host of this podcast series where we take unapologetically black approaches to the topics and issues impacting our community. On this show, we continue our series of environmental justice as part of a campaign we call Earth Needs Allies. This campaign is in collaboration with Flossin Media and the Soul District Business Association. The Soul District's annual fundraising event, the MLK Dream Run. This event is happening on Saturday and Sunday, September 17th and 18th at PCC Cascade Campus in Killingsworth in Portland, Oregon. Today we welcome a solid young fella who I've had the opportunity to work with over a series of time and over a period of time. The young man's name is Nate McCoy from the National Association of Minority Contractors. They're one of our Pursuit of Happiness sponsors for the year's run. Nate is the executive director of NAMAC. This is a membership organization that helps minority contractors navigate the construction industry in Oregon. This includes navigating the proposal process, connecting them to public agencies and other large general contractors. Having worked as a construction manager for the city of Portland, Nate is intimately aware of the problems facing African Americans and other minority groups working in the construction field. With the passing of the recent mega infrastructure bill and other epic projects, the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project, Nate and his team are needed more now than ever. Welcome, my brother.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, man, it's it's the house. You know what I'm saying? We got to get you in here, man, to get you out. You know.
Man, I hear you.
So, hey, man, what's been going on? Talk to me, Nate. I mean, how's things going over there now? Tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Where you come from, all that. Give me a little bit of background on who this cat is sitting in this place here. I mean, you get all this flamboyant introductions and stuff. People need to know a little bit more about who you is.
No. Well, no, it's a pleasure to be here, and certainly appreciate what you do in the community too, John, and through your various organizations. The beat that you keep in the community is real, and I just want to be one of the next generations to help carry that baton into the future, much like your MLK Dream Run. We in our stretch of the leg, NAMAC Oregon is a organization that's been around since 1997. We were born out of, which I go back in history on, we were born out of the 1969 Civil Rights Movement in Oakland, California.
Boy, them was the days.
And them was the days. And a lot of mobilization and unity and a lot of things that we still face today were collectively efforts that NAMAC born with its first chapter in Oakland, California. 50 plus years later, we're now in 25 states in some of the most diverse cities in America. And I always use the acknowledgement of NAMAC Oregon being in Portland, Oregon, one of the whitest cities in the universe. And if we can create the blueprint we've already put on paper, that's being able to work with our white male and female counterparts as well as other groups of color to really envision economic justice.
You hear him over there? Mr. Jenkins, you hear him?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. He worked that magic on that bike, though. He tell us a little bit about something a little bit. So, I didn't know NAMAC was a national association. How many cities is NAMAC in on the national?
Yeah, 25. We're in Oakland, we're in LA, we're in Houston, we're in Fort Worth, Texas, we're in Atlanta, we're in Chicago. Like I said, Portland, Oregon might be the one that's got the least diversity of the states. But what I'm proud to say, John, is we might have the biggest, fastest growing chapter in the U.S.
Yeah, man, and I think that's really where this is at. But so what's going on exciting in the organization these days? What's the more current, exciting topics that you guys are tackling and dealing with these days?
Yeah, well, the beautiful thing is as we, as an advocacy organization representing over 100 small businesses of color, both in the design and construction related industries, we see an opportune time now earmarking some of the dollars nationally being dictated by President Biden, billions and billions of dollars getting ready to hit our city. And as we've worked over 20 years or so, trying to knock down doors to opportunities for capacity building for these small businesses of color we also know that NAMAC has to play a new role in the workforce development space. A space that we are not represented in. If you start with African Americans, we're less than 1% of the construction industry, including design.
Wow.
Our Latino counterparts are more in the 30+% numbers, very active in the workforce. And we see some opportunities with other culturally specific groups that want to see more of their percentages go up. So if we're able to not only kind of re-campaign, if you will, the construction and design industries as a viable first option for a career, I think we're able to reach more kids that through STEM education, they're already excelling more than kids who don't have STEM education.
Gotcha.
So if we're really going to tackle the school-based problems of not getting kids graduated, we might need to think about how folks of color use their hands historically and how we want to empower these young people to know economics are waiting for them and not waiting for you to be left behind.
Yeah. You know, Nate, in light of the theme in which you heard us talk a little bit about, you know, Earth needs allies and this whole green space, man, and you know, and it's been a real interesting topic lately, man, you know, especially in the black community. Okay, so, you know, Nate, you know, man, I'm excited about what you guys have been doing, what you're trying to do, accomplish all those things. But, you know, man, there seems to be a transition in trends, right? And then in conversation. So in light of the campaign we're doing right now, right, Earth Needs Allies and in this green space, you know, and every time lately, it seems like that's where the impetus is going. It's turned, but you know, but between me and you and the fence post, whenever they start talking about something green, they start talking to me. And it sounds like, you know, well, they must be talking to white people, right? But how are you guys interfacing with this whole transition and where some of these dollars are going and some of the conversations and trends? I mean, how are you supporting black organizations in the construction field to start looking at some of these green spaces and all this stuff? So just speak to us a little bit more about that, because man, on the show, I'm still trying to figure out where the meld is. You know what I'm saying? Where the intersection is, how we get the, you know, getting broke off somehow about how this is going to benefit us, because they're trying to sell it to us, and somehow or another we trying to adjust to it and bring it in. But how effective are we being with this in your mind, and do we have a campaign and a strategy to initiate this in this specific sector?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because there's two things I think about often. It's a quote that I've heard you say many times as well as a scripture. So I'll start out with the quote. The quote I've heard you say is, if we can control the narrative, we can control the outcome.
Oh, you hear that, King?
And I also followed up with scripture that says, our people perish for their lack of knowledge, which in my mind is one and the same. And it seems that with this, you know, greening of America, green workforce jobs, climate control, a lot of the narrative is not being controlled in any meaningful way by us. And when I say that, it's because these technologies that are advancing, we're often the ones left behind and at least 20 years behind the curve of opportunity. And so what we need to be doing is, one, having more campaigns to hopefully wake more people up of color, starting with the next generations. You might miss the bell curve with, you know, your 40, 50-plus-year-olds out here, but if we can at least empower those folks as well as the next generation, these opportunities aren't going away. It's the wave of the future, and I think this future does not bear us in it if we do not take control of the resources and the knowledge. So I think that's the area we need to strengthen at NAMAC, is working with our coalition partners and really making sure that we amplify how you show up as a person of color in these spaces, female and women. Female and male.
Is that considered a challenge? You guys have some challenges in that area?
It's a huge challenge. As you know, we got a lot of trauma. And you said this in the beginning, that many of the problems we had 50 plus years ago, we have today, if not worse today. And so it's really trying to wake up folks who might be going through too many trauma-like experiences to even hear the message.
And you know, Nate, that's a real interesting, and King, if you want to at any point in time, you can jump in here. You know, but that's that one there hits me in my solar plex, man, and to a bigger degree. You know, when we think about that whole idea of how we begin to somehow control the narrative in this, and at the same time really bring forth our celebration and our ability to be appreciated in this sector. It's not like as if we hadn't already been. You know, and I think about our ancestors and all that, we come from that, you know, and lately, you know, we get a lot of African refugees and all that kind of stuff, but when you hear them talk about how they have to walk 10 miles to school every morning across a big field and about, you know, but at the same time, how they lived off the land, how they harvest their food from different places. So this whole idea of somehow or another assuming that we don't have any investment in this, you know, is sort of kind of disturbing for me a little bit, you know, and the fact that it seems like we have to be sold in some kind of special kind of way to be able to understand, you know, that we can do an energy efficient house, you know, and the idea of how we evolve and do the things that we do. So I don't know, Ken, what are you thinking about a little bit of this conversation that we're talking about here right now?
Honestly, it's just a lot to take on. I don't even know how to feel about it. It's a lot. It's a lot. I have to take time to sit on that because I don't know exactly how I feel about it right now. It's a lot. Some of it I don't even understand yet, honestly. So
about this energy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, about how we can cut emissions and not use gas, use more battery charged cars. You know, make sure that our houses or homes are insulated in a way that, you know, speaking about that, Nate, you know how I can get me some air conditioning?
Absolutely. I mean, those HVAC contractors are in high demand, as you know right now.
You know, they get,
You're absolutely
right.
right.
That lick, you know. So, what does Good Earth Allies look like in the construction field of these days, Nate? I mean, what is, in your mind, what does that look like? How are they evolving?
Yeah, I mean, you know, even hearing a little bit of what King is saying only feeds, you know, what we were just talking about, you know, access and opportunity and awareness, you know, and I think for these contractors, it's the same thing. Because this whole earth and energy efficiency space, this is not unknown to these contractors that are already out here. I mean, to install HVAC equipment, mini splits, what have you, these are contractors doing it already. It's just there's more of a concentrated effort to do more of it, and there's new kind of installation processes that would be non-foreign to many of our small businesses of color, but it's because of who is letting the project opportunities out or how the resources are taken advantage of. We don't have that information.
So it comes back to some of this same reality we're combating continuously on, this systemic reality of how the transference of prosperity and wealth, you know, who gets what opportunity through what. So you still, some of your biggest challenges I'm hearing you say is still systemic, and some of the historical resistances that we've had to deal with over the years, those things are still in tow is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of a drag, you know, to some degree, Nate, but, you know, we had originally started talking a little bit about the substance that it takes to get into a business and be successful in business today, even before we started the conversation on the podcast, and talking about what is required of us as an internal, as a people today, is the mechanics that are required of us to be successful in a marketplace the same as they were some 50 years ago. You know, what insights and knowledge is applicable from that time and now, and then what are the newer ones that us older fellas got to learn to adopt? And you know, man, and then you have all these other issues around gender and race and, you know, and equity and all these things. It only makes it just seems to me each time they throw another element in it, it just makes it more and more damn confusing, man. And not only that, it seems to make it more difficult for us to arrive at the prize.
Absolutely.
And if the prize is economic justice, you know, what a price. I mean, and you know, and even though that we start looking at this, you know, like that whole thing with Herschel Walker, you know, them ballers, you know, they get crazy, like, and they talk about, well, if you take one group of gas or substance over here, you create it, and then you all the way across the world, you take the same amount out of it, and you detract from it, you're the energy, over there they doing it, so if they taking it out, we ain't really losing, I mean, we losing the things, we ain't gaining, and all of this conversation. And this one cat looked at that and he said, this is crazy. It's like trading marbles. You know, you ain't doing shit. You know, ain't nobody, the gas ain't moving from one location to the next. I mean, but then the bottom line came down to, was that in order for us to offset any of these gases and stuff that is in the atmosphere, we have to add more trees. And what the bottom line seemed to come down to was that there is not enough land to add the amount of trees that we need to offset this shit
Yep,
in the world.
yep.
And so that was what really sort of got me, when it landed. It's like, okay, so what is he saying? Well, to me, it seems like we have to eliminate more people. And that seems like what they had an agenda to be doing. I'm glad that seemed like that plan was in
It's
motion,
working, yep.
And I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist, but COVID seemed to wipe out a hell of a lot of folks.
And there's more. It's going to keep coming. Yeah.
See that? And so what becomes important, Nate? I guess that's, what are some of your biggest challenges, I guess, in terms of how NAMAC, to advance the national agenda of NAMAC? What do you think some of your biggest challenges are going to be as you move forward over the next 10 years? And how do you think you're going to, and then what are you going to see as some of your biggest wins?
Yep. Well, I go back to our motto at NAMAC of building bridges and breaking barriers. And that all starts with having authentic and meaningful relationships. I think anything in life that's a good relationship is worth fostering and working through and holding each other accountable. And I think what does not often happen is having seats at the right tables when decisions are being made. And we know many of these tables that have decisions being made are relationships amongst those at those tables. And if we're not represented, we certainly don't have that relationship intact. So whether you call it an ally or a perceived enemy or something in between, it's NAMAC's job to try to foster that relationship and hold our industry accountable. Because at the end of the day, as Reverend Jesse Jackson said, if you're paying taxes and you're unrepresented, there's a big problem there.
Yeah.
And so many of these dollars we're talking about on these streets are all tax-based dollars for the most part.
Right.
So we've got to take advantage of our time to eat and eat big and not just be waiting for the scraps like we've had historically.
Yeah, and that sounds like a mindset conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And you had alluded to trauma. And I'm really starting to see some of the organizations, such as yours, such as ours, or the Myers over there, begin to incorporate experiential processing and philanthropic giving for people to develop some of these measurable outcomes in these kinds of spaces. But it becomes actually a challenge also, because you and I both know that the substance, it took us an abnormal or an irregular situation to get us here, and it's going to take one of those similar to get us out. And and when I start thinking about how for so long we neglected to look at the effects of that historical relationship with us in America, with blacks in America, and we failed to understand that those things had great ramifications. And it didn't necessarily mean, but what I find to be very, very interesting about all that too is, in spite of the condition, we still rose and continue to. But I think that just imagine what acceleration we can get if we were to build these constructs in a way to where it began to address and identify the trauma realities that are associated with black people, and to begin to measure those impacts and begin to find solutions to accelerate healthy rehabilitation in relationship to those. And so all our constructs, we should begin to look at how we are building in some identification systems where when people do come into our spaces, come into our workspaces, come into our employment spaces, contribution is that construct could at least give them some kind of impact or result once that is identified, that they can get a measurable growth reality in relationship to the organization that they're part of. Or we have some kind of centralized base where when one of our employees are identified to have it, that you're able to tap into a system to allow them to accelerate some healing or some growth and that kind of. So we're actually implementing that in the business association situation right now, and which is kind of fascinating, because when you ask someone, what do you think it's going to take for you to be successful in this business? And even though you're standing at the runway, you got all of the measurable factors that you need to be successful, and you know you got everything that the government can give you and all that, and you're standing there ready for takeoff. The question is, when you look at the numbers of how many businesses survive in the first 15 months of business, you wonder, did they get the memo? You know, when they were in college, did the professor teach the class? Did you know what I'm saying? And because you and I know, after being in business for 25, 30, 40 years, that it takes a special kind of internal substance, okay? But are we teaching that substance? And can that substance be taught, you know? What is that last grace that you need? When you got everybody lined up on the 20, and they all 250 pounds, they all run 4.5, they all, you know, can lean to the left and lean to the right the same. What is the special substance to have somebody be able to put it over for the score?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And are we selling that, or are we selling the Kool-Aid? The other part, you know?
Yeah, no, I think there's three things that kind of come to mind for me. I mean, I think it starts with trying to empower people.
Yeah.
To know that they have resources. You know, sometimes we fall into the trap of worrying about a part of the body or a part of the business, and in lieu of the whole body and the whole business. And what I mean by that is you have businesses out here that either are strong in one category or the other. Maybe they understand how to do the work in the field, but they don't understand the back office needs. Or maybe they come from an educated background as a graduate of a business school, if you will, and they understand the business side, but they have to be trained on understanding the field. And I think what we do is sometimes we just overly promote one side in lieu of the other. And for any small business or even any big business, you got to really tackle both sides. So I think the empowering part is really, as you said, creating this navigation system so that we really understand the true needs.
Right.
And some of them might even not be business needs. It may be something more about life.
Right.
You know, that's
it's all about life.
Exactly. So really understanding, and if you're not the right organization to help on that, you know, what are those resources to help keep them empowered? The second would be humility.
Right.
I think sometimes we don't have enough humility.
Yeah.
The construction industry, a lot of these big businesses sometimes don't have humility, thinking about how small business interacts and the activities that they need to put on the line, like putting your house up to support your business on its last leg. Some of these bigger businesses have never had to really operate like that because, you know, if you're over 100 employees, you got big departments that handle many aspects of the full body that we were speaking about.
Right. And usually the right hand don't know what the left hand does.
Exactly. And so we need to really understand from a humble perspective, you know, what are the fears? What are the opportunities of these businesses? What is your success look like? Because we might dictate what we think, but it may be very different than what that business thinks. So customizing the things that we need from a humility standpoint is, I think, very much needed to connect with people. Third being, and we've talked about this many times, is really holding each other accountable. Are you really ready? You know, and in some cases we got members of NAMAC that might be more ready to be in the workforce for some said NAMAC companies that are already of significant size, to really learn all the things that maybe they have as pit stops or pitfalls for their business concerns.
Right.
Maybe working in a company for X amount of years would be better than running a company that might be perceived as a little raggedy or really not really operating at a level they need to.
Right.
Or setting yourself up with customized trainings that keep your business going, but that you're scaling at the right size. And really, honestly, for any business, and I'll tell them the best thing you can do for your business is build the foundation and your systems and your processes before anything.
Yeah, well, you know, that was deep. Did you get that there, Pastor Jake?
And King, if it don't make sense, you let me know. I'll explain.
Now remember, I wrote them down for you, okay? Empower, you know, the other one was individual, what was that? Humility and accountability. You know, but, not a but, very similar to what we believe also. And I think that it unpacks itself out into the individual. And I think that if any construct should be able to deliver on three things, or to reinforce three perceptions in any person that they have come into their environment. And that's reinforcing the perception of significance, the perception of influence, and the perception of capability. And, and if your system is not reinforcing those three things, then your construct has got an issue.
Dead in the water.
You know what I'm saying? So, but I do appreciate you, Nate. Man, is King, is there anything that, while we're here right now, that you would like to flush, activate, bring to light, share at this point in time before we let this brother get on with his very busy day?
No, I just have a question about NAMAC. So are you like a big so a little more explanation of what NAMAC is, a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So NAMAC is basically a membership-driven organization that represents design and construction companies that are owned by people of color. Specifically, our charter, being the National Association of Minority Contractors broadly, has a charter that really says these are the target audiences for our members. Doesn't mean that we can't work with white companies out here. There's many programs for a lot of those individuals, but we come from a culturally specific and culturally competent level of organizing our members, really helping support their business needs while also helping them build relationships. The other part we do is, I didn't mention about our staff, but we have a staff of 6 and growing that are folks that either have a law background, a business and project management background. I happen to be an architect and project manager prior to coming to NAMAC, had never ran a business much before. I had to go through many of the things I was saying that many of these small businesses have to do in tooling up for the kind of level of leadership or level of running a business that you need to. One of the things that we really try to offer is being a learning organization. So this is the being humble and have some humility. We don't know it all. We learn from our members, they learn from us, but when we do learn things, the first people we give that power and that resource and knowledge to is our members. And they in return give us some of the same knowledge banks so that we're actually growing, prospering, and learning together. Right now we have too many programs that isolate us, so we offer group trainings as well as individual one-on-one trainings so that everybody in the room is learning together. Most people of color are kinetic learners, so they need to learn while they're actually working. We don't offer your in the classroom college kind of trainings. We offer a lot of while you're in the field dealing with real problems, let's bring those problems to these trainings so that we can actually equip you real time. Back to economic justice. We want to make sure you're getting paid and not just in classroom settings losing money.
Right. Yeah. That's important. I like that. That's good to know. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, just before we pause, man, just a second, in terms of thinking about some of the other stuff, in light of some of the dollars, let's say we tracing the dollars, Nate, and like some of the dollars that are coming, like this $100 million that's come down for electric cars charging station, and then of course all that millions of dollars that Clean Energy Fund and Trust that, how was that? Talk to us a little bit about how that interfaces with what you guys are doing, and are you in support of it, not in support of it, but give me a little bit of pro and cons on those two things.
Yeah, well, we're huge supporters of the Portland Clean Energy Fund. In fact, we were one of the parties that helped put that on the ballot for our voters to approve. I think we were one of the only states that got that approved a couple of years back,
right,
when energy efficiency across the nation was kind of the hot topic of discussion. One of the things I would say, going back to relationships that we've been spending a lot of time, especially myself, is really trying to create partnerships with the right entities that control a lot of that opportunity. It doesn't get much bigger and better than Energy Trust of Oregon, who has had some blemishes over the years around their commitments to DEI and how they employ people of color who deliver on some of the resources we talked about in the community, looking like the folks in that community.
Right.
As well as what I've learned is a trade partner vendor list that is internal to Energy Trust of Oregon and many other energy efficiency organizations, which dictates how they put the work out for contractors to bid and really be equipped with those resources.
Got you.
So, for instance, knowing that there's all these tables and these systems in place, much like NAMAC's calling card nationally, is we want to dictate how we show up and how we train and how we learn and how we actually work on these projects. So with using the Portland Clean Energy Fund, we got a pilot planning grant to put together what's called a contractor development pathway for those that are already in these existing spaces or those learning to be in these spaces,
Right.
going through some 6-week curriculum and training, all with this earn while you learn kind of methodology, which really is while you're learning, you need to be also getting work so you can really apply this work
Gotcha.
to the learning and make some money doing so. So
Right.
PCRI is one of our clients who has many houses, as you know,
Right.
in their portfolio. A lot of other affordable housing providers are doing this electric car station vehicle registration and getting these at new affordable housing complexes. We know them all. So we're starting to earmark these pipeline projects in the industry to make sure that when they are starting to reach out to community to bring them in to build these electric stations or do that HVAC or even that solar on the roof, that we're looking at our people first, and they'll be trained and have the certifications necessary.
Got you. So y'all gonna be riding the bike and building it too.
Oh yeah, we have to. We have to because again, we get left behind too often.
I'm trying to tell you, it's that we better improvise if we go overcome.
Quickly.
It's
Absolutely.
adapt and improvise. So, but listen here, y'all. We coming to
One more question. So you guys were having a good discussion. So speaking of responsibility, so now what is the minority contractor's responsibility in all of this, right? I mean, you're bringing, you can, bring the horse to the trap, but you can't make him drink. So can you speak a little bit about the minority contractors? Well, I guess you spoke to it because you spoke about accountability and humility in that
Right.
on the big person side and the funder side. But so what's the characteristics that you're hoping to get from the folks that you're trying out?
Yep.
Where do they need to be working out?
Yep.
Yeah, he did mention that a little bit earlier, but I'll be in that. Okay, so, but anyway, Nate, before we end, I think that there's always this perception that somehow the responsibility lies on the shoulders of the man, right? To give us, to train us, to give us federal support, whatever. What's the posture of the minority contractor? What are some of the positions or some of the postures that he should adopt, and some of the characteristics that you would believe that is sort of friendly that will allow someone to advance in this challenging arena at this point?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is bandwidth. I think we need to create a bigger and fast-track bench back to the workforce development side of NAMAC's agenda moving forward. Is that, one, there's plenty of opportunities out here, and even some will be able to take advantage of that. But with there being a diminishing workforce across the board, knowing that we need over 11,000 new workers in construction alone, we're going to be looking outward to other communities, not in Oregon, to bring those folks in. So if we don't get in front of it, it will be dead on arrival for any small business to start growing and taking advantage of many of these opportunities without them having a growing workforce. And that's not just those building the project in the field. It's also your project managers, your superintendents, your cost estimators, your accountant, your financial, controller, all of those things. It would be nice to have a pipeline into those industries for our next generation youth.
So then, what I'm hearing you say then is be able to tap into the educational and those constructs and those systems that train and develop people, right?
Yep.
But what are you thinking that the posture or the person going into the industry, what type of responsibilities should they come into that space with? What are some of the work that they personally can develop themselves personally coming into this thing? What do you think some of the responsibility of those of that is for the worker themselves?
Yeah, I mean, you would think as generations and generations have come that this would be somewhat easy to say, but it seems to be more of a daunting task. But soft skills, being able to look at somebody and communicate, look them in the eye, show up with, good first impressions, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. A lot of these things I think a lot of our grandparents taught us, that some of these kids today don't have those same grandparents talking to them. That's one. I think the other is being coachable, being able to take directions, even if at times the directions are not as smooth as you might want them to be. Folks in construction have to deliver projects, so they may not treat you like a little kid or be very sympathetic about, you know, your excuses for being late to work or whatever it might be. We've got to find a way to make sure that, you know, folks are really being coachable, really listening, and really willing to learn. That's a huge problem with some of our millennial generation, is that they either know it all or have seen it all, and, you know, can't nobody tell me anything. And again,
You hear that, King?
I know a few. I actually know a few like that.
And I don't, you know, and again, I'm not even against that because I happen to be one of those first millennials, but I think it's more like hearing what somebody's trying to message to you, and, you know, really take away and, you know, and create kind of that scenario mentally of they're really trying to get on me because they actually care, versus it being they don't like me and they just want to fire myself on this job site. Gotta do better.
You know, this here will open up a whole lot of other stuff. I'm sure she didn't want to, I don't know if you wanted to go down this road.
I wanted to say something about that one.
Go for it, King. Talk a little bit about it.
I sometimes think like that disobedience and like listening with the new generation, it comes from like too much sensitivity. Like you said, with them, you know, looking at it as as disrespect or someone not liking them instead of just someone like caring or like trying to look into your best interests. Like people just, I think it's just too much sensitivity. Like they just need to put their feelings and emotions to the side, honestly.
Yeah, and that opens up another. You can unpack that one too, that feeling issue. But you know, and as an old man sitting in the room, which I don't like to tout it all. I mean, because I got some issues around that, PTSD around that shit. Just getting old, thinking about that, you know. But you know, this whole issue of being fragile or a living and existing in transformational times, right? Transition of any kind. And then, of course, being able to be adaptable. You know, we speak a little bit about earlier, most people say, well, when you hire a new employee, what's the requirements? What does these organizations look at? And they usually look at, the beginning was looking at IQ. How smart is this person that's coming to work for me? And did they go to school or whatever, you know, their IQ. And then they looked at, you know, they began to recognize that some of these smart people in the container together, you know, had no inappropriate emotional skills. Couldn't figure out how to jump out buildings, you know, because the market crash, whatever that was, you know, there's always some other kind. But then, with our society changing, there was a third one that's been implemented, and you hear all the charismatic preachers and all that stuff start talking about, and that's the AQ. The ability to simply be adaptable in an environment. How adaptable are you in transition? And then what does that... But let's say we package that in something else. Say we look at the fact of our times. Let's bring it more current and then more personal. The issue is if we lived under Obama, for example, it almost seemed like it was a weird trick though on us, right? Right? You know, it's like it gave us some opportunity to breathe and to feel some sense of possible normality. I don't have to carry this gun every day, right? Or this sword every day. And perhaps he will protect us like Dad, you know, or something like that. So there was a sort of a lull in our, at least in my disposition. But then when that other beast took office, the Trump era, you know, man, in the beginning, I wanted to leave it open to that. You know, I wanted to see, because I spoke to one of my elders in my family, and he would say something like, shit, he ain't no different than all the rest of them. Like, you know, that kind of thing. So, what to be expected. But somewhere about 6 months into that, I began to feel the threat. You know, the real threat. The issue of whether or not, if we were going to regress ourselves back into mediocrity, is that any of those opportunities and advancements and gains became real clear that they were under attack. And it made me very, very, very uncomfortable because now I began to think that I was living my father's era or my grandfather's time, you know, and I was not that far removed from that because I remember seeing the Klan ride up and down the road at the house and throwing bricks and stuff. So it becomes a real interesting struggle for the human development reality of this. How does a person develop a character in the midst of all this tailspin and whirlspin and constant changing of demeanor and posture? Where do you rest? Well, there is some historical evidence and data on how to arrive at a center in balance. And I think that if I was to offer anything to our listeners in terms of demeanor and characteristics, is that you find balance. You find a demeanor that you can embrace forgiveness and that you can embrace love and kindness. Now, for those who have been victimized, that seems like that's an oxymoron, you know, but it seems like it is one of the only last refuge that we as a people, to find that center and balance before we can advance forward, we need to find some sense of peace, you know, and that I'm okay, and that we're safe and that we matter. And so with that, guys, man, thank you for coming on the Black Beat today, Nate, and to share how we can all better Earth's allies. We invite all of you to get involved with the campaign series. Join us on the 11th annual MLK Dream Run weekend celebration, Saturday and Sunday, September 17th and 18th at PCC Cascade on Killingsworth in Portland, Oregon. Go MLK Dream Run. And Nate, man, I do appreciate you showing up on the podcast, man. It's always a good time to sit down and chit-chat with you, my brother. You know, and again, we're off to the next race, to the next run. But just don't forget to stop and love someone, including yourself.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. And it takes a village. So
thank you very much, Nate. And thank you, my brother King, for showing up on that youthful spot over there and making those contributions, my brother. We look forward to hearing more from you in these podcasts as you take on your own endeavor, and I look forward to being a support to you in that. You hear?
Yes, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Join the Soul District Business Association for our 11th annual MLK Dream Run weekend celebration coming September 17th and 18th to Northeast Portland. This two-day event features live music, the Soulful Vendor Village, raffle prizes, and the 5, 10, and 15K races. We've also added a free kids race for 9 and under. This year's theme is environmental justice because Earth needs allies. Select winners and participants have a chance to win a round-trip ticket courtesy of Alaska Airlines. Visit our website for more information and register today, mlkdreamrun.org.